So on the right hand side is your standard grayscale conversion. Let's have a look at how we would do this one. Well, instead of doing any form of mode adjustment down to grayscale, I'm actually going to use layers to do this. And again, it's going to use hue saturation. Now come across to the layers palette. What we're going to do is create two very simple adjustment layers. Now we're not having a mask selected when we do this, but we're using techniques now that you're starting to become familiar with. This one's kind of fun. Come down to the bottom of the layers palette to where the adjustment layer icon is, click and hold, and let's go up and choose hue saturation. When the dialog box comes up, don't do anything, just click OK. The reason we're doing that is that sets up our first layer, which will allow us to adjust the tones in the basic RGB image. But we have to have another layer on top of this in order for it to work. Come back down to the adjustment layer option again and create another hue saturation layer on top. And this time, let's take the saturation down to -100. This will basically drain all of the color out, leaving us with just the grayscale. So if we say OK at this point, just hit the Tab key and get rid of the palettes for a second, you can see that these two images are now identical. The desaturation process is exactly the same as doing the standard grayscale conversion. However, bringing the palettes back, if we now come to the first adjustment layer that we created and double click the adjustment layer icon right here to bring up the hue saturation dialog box again, this is where we now get our control from. If you have a look in the upper left hand side, we're currently editing the master, the overall color values of everything inside the file. A lot of people don't realize that clicking on here will reveal all the different selections of color that we can access. You'll see that there are shortcuts for each of these. Reds is Command 1, Command 2 for yellows, and so forth. And obviously on the PC, that's just Control 1, Control 2, and Control 3. So we can use these to rotate through. So let's go to reds first. And then all we need to do is now, because we've isolated the red areas of the original image, and by that, don't forget, we're using an adjustment layer here which is affecting the original RGB beneath. The top layer is doing the grayscale, so whatever we adjust in here is still going to end up grayscale, but there are different tones being applied to the RGB. So if we now take the lightness, we can drag the lightness of the reds down and choose exactly what we're looking for. You see, you could go brighter, you can go darker, it's up to you. I don't want to go too dark on this. Set it to about -25 maybe. Then I'm going to press Command 2 or Control 2 on the PC, which will take me to the yellows. You'll see now the yellows are isolated here. And this one I find the most important. The problem with an image like this is you'll see that because of the brightness of the blonde hair, and this model does have really, really light blonde hair, it will be lost in the grayscale process because there's not enough tone there to start with. Well, if we come here to the lightness inside the yellow selection only, drag that all the way down to -100, we're actually reintroducing a lot more detail into the grayscale than will be visible normally. So just by simply dragging the yellow values down, we can do that. Well, let's do the same. Let's press Command 3 and go to the greens. By all means, drag that down and see how much color is reintroduced. You can see a little bit of the background getting darker, so choose whatever feels good around about -64 or so. Command 4 will take us to the cyans, and again, depending on how much cyan is visible in the image, you will notice changes. This is mostly in the background because the image is obviously made up of reds and yellows because of the color of the shirt and the skin tones. The final one that we would edit is probably the blues. Again, mostly based in the background, so you can see just the highlights behind the model's head are changing color. That's pretty handy because it's darkening this outside point here, which does reveal a little bit more of the hair. And then the final one you'll see under here is the magentas. Now this is something I probably don't want to change because the image is made up so much of magenta, and that does convert fairly well into grayscale. It's the other colors I was worried about. You see, if we go too dark on this, it will start to adjust the things in different directions. A slight bit of jaggedness and highlights appearing inside the face here. So I'm actually going to leave that one at 0, okay? Well, once you've done all of those simple changes, go ahead and click OK. And obviously, they're changeable at any time. You can always pull back the adjustment layer. But here's the important thing. If you turn off all the palettes by hitting the Tab key and have a look at the physical differences between these two files, it's very easy to see the quality. What I'm going to do is, on the model image, just use my zoom tool to enlarge up to 50%. Just click over on the image on the right and do exactly the same. And have a look at the difference there. The detail here in the eyes, in the lips, the tone in the face, and most importantly, the hair. All the detail that we see here on the left-hand side is completely washed out in the standard grayscale conversion. So this is a wonderful process for creating quality grayscale images from your RGB or even CMYK original. Very cool function.